Welcome to this presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Welcome to Late to the Party, a program on the Paper Street Pictures Podcast Network. Your hosts for the following are myself, Shawn Talley, and joining me for this, as he traditionally does, a fellow member of the Paper Street Pictures production team. And not unlike Satan himself, this man is good. This man is our pal. He is Mr. Cameron Burns. How goes it, Cameron?
You know, you'd be shocked by how often I get compared to Satan. It's really a thing. I don't know why that is, but no, things are going great. I'm excited for this episode. I'm excited to talk about some movies.
Yeah, we're going to do something a little different than we normally do, which is talk for a minute, then pitch to a guest, because I have to say, so we don't make her sit there awkwardly and quietly for too long. Joining us for this installment, she is my trusty co-host on the OG Paper Street branded program, the Paper Street Podcast. She's a writer, director, editor, Renaissance woman, dare I say, a filmmaker, a horror movie fanatic who even co-hosts Right or Wrong horror-themed trivia nights with her partner Brad in the Denver area. She can tell us more about that later. She is Becky Sayers. Becky, welcome to a Paper Street Podcast as a guest.
Aw, thank you for the warm welcome. I always say you should follow me around and introduce me everywhere I go, because no one does it better than Shawn.
That's actually what my bumper sticker says.
No one does it better than Shawn.
That's right.
If you guys make those bumper stickers, I will rock them. I'm just to be clear, I'll hand them out.
I have a question. Is this like the podcast version of like those very special sitcom episodes where like Urkel comes on Full House? Like, is this a crossover episode?
Ooh.
TGIF. Let's make it so. Yeah, the perfect storm, if you will. With the two Paper Street branded podcasts have sort of melded in some weird way. I guess now Cameron has to be a guest on the other show for some weird reason.
Yeah, well, I've already been a guest on the other show.
You have been, but that just devolved into Taco Bell talk. If episode 7, Scare Package 1, go back and listen to the Paper Street podcast about that.
That's not too dissimilar to what happens here. We try to stay on brand and eventually just start talking about Taco Bell.
Taco Bell is the Godwin's Law of Paper Street Pictures.
All
really
roads lead to Taco Bell.
So at the halfway point, does Becky become the host and I become the guest? How does this work? Is there a theme we're following? Is it every 10 minutes are we switching?
No, let's actually stay on the thing, since I did say she's now a guest this time around. So let's continue as you and I being hosts, and you give the folks who may have never listened to this a quick explainer of what this show is.
I got to be honest, that sounds a lot less fun. Yeah, so what we do here on Late to the Party is we find a guest we really want to talk to. In this case, the wonderful Becky Sayers. And we say, hey, Becky, what's a super big movie that for whatever reason you just never found the time to watch? And hopefully they come back with a really big, awesome movie that we're like, what? I can't believe you haven't seen that. And then we get together like right now. We talk about the why, and then we go watch the movie. And Becky comes back and says, oh, man, I sure do love that movie we're about to talk about. Notice, Shawn, I didn't talk about the actual movie. I'm going to let you do the actual pitch there, because that's what hosts do.
Yes, well, my normal segue is one more thing about said guest. Becky Sayers has never seen the 1989 Joe Dante film, The BURBS, despite being a person who's seen many of things in the similar vein and similar things from Joe Dante, as we just talked about on our most recent Paper Street podcast.
What? Becky, say it ain't so.
Yep, I'm afraid to say it's the truth. You got me. I have never seen The BURBS.
And here I thought you're already on to deep cuts. Every other week you give your deep cut slasher of the week. This is like a shallow cut. How did you not see this shallow cut?
Well, I do remember seeing the VHS tape on the shelves of my local video store. I don't know why it was not something I ever picked up. And this is very horror adjacent. You know, Joe Dante directing it, and I haven't seen it yet, and I actually don't really know much about the plot or anything, but I've been told that, oh, if you're a fan of horror movies, you'll like this kind of dark comedy sort of angle. I'm imagining that. I don't know what it means. Seems up my alley. I don't know. I've just never saw it.
If I'm being honest, I have seen it, but I have only seen this movie once, I believe. And that was a long time ago. And I remember very little of this movie. I know what it's about. I know what kind of the tone is, but like I'm going along for a little bit of a ride here too. I've seen it, but not for a very long time.
Interesting. I didn't know it wasn't as much in your DNA, if you will, as is mine. And I know we've talked about this on other episodes. Like if you had premium cable or HBO or something as a kid, I think this movie might have been a little more front and center. And I want to say that's how I saw it a lot in my youth, is because it was on premium cable. But I will agree, though, that this is, despite Joe Dante, despite the being Tom Hanks of all people, this is not one of the most readily available movies, which we'll talk about in a second, too. But it just isn't in the culture as much. Like horror fans and horror adjacent type fans and just Joe Dante, those kind of 80s movie fans, those who know it seem to really dig it and can quote it and this and that. But it's not permeated the culture the way like his Gremlins or something else may have done so in that late 80s, mid 80s.
Which is really surprising given the Tom Hanks of it all, that people haven't kind of gone back to it just for that reason. But yeah, it's kind of crazy that I haven't seen it again. It's been on my list of movies to rewatch for a very long time, and it just kind of never happened. And then, I kind of held off because we were about to record this episode. But it's not like I could have watched it even if I wanted to, because as we just found out in the prep for this episode, Shawn, this movie's harder to find than that Jerry Lewis movie about a clown.
Hey, this is Angels in the Outfield level, gone from everything. It's funny. So I brought this up to Becky because when we proposed this idea, she gave me a few movies. I selfishly did pick this movie because I do know it well, and I have some friends in our age kind of range that do love this movie. I feel like it's zeitgeisty enough because of the Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher, and there's known folks in it, Bruce Dern. But the fact that it's not been readily streaming over the years has been an issue, and I was excited because it was finally on Netflix. And as we're recording this, I had to inform Becky and Cameron both. I'm like, hey, the movie left Netflix a couple weeks ago as of April 30th. And not only is it nowhere else, it is also unavailable on Amazon and those kind of places you normally rent or buy movies. So it's become a bit of an issue. Hopefully it's not for anybody who is listening to this. Hopefully they know the movie enough that they're happy to hear us have a conversation about it. But Becky can tell you, she starts Googling with me about it, and she found out she could see it this weekend in the interim between our calls.
Yeah, for Alamo Drafthouse, if you're lucky enough to live by one. It's part of the 1989 series. It just so happens to be playing this weekend. It's lucky for me, unlucky for you two, I guess. But, guests have it easy. So, I'm excited. I already have my tickets bought. I'm going to see it on Sunday. My partner Brad's coming with me. He loves this movie as well. And he's been wanting to show it to me for a while. And just as he discovered I hadn't seen it, he got really excited because of this conversation. And then I was like, well, let's hold off until I'm doing it for the podcast. So he's excited to finally get to show me the Burbs because he thinks I'm going to love it. And one thing I was thinking about as you were talking, Shawn, another reason probably why I haven't seen this is I didn't really grow up with cable access. So if we didn't have it on VHS, I probably didn't see it. I grew up with 3 channels, the primary, like whatever came in on bunny ears sort of situation. Right. So we relied on buying VHS tapes or renting them from a store. So if I didn't have the luxury of like just catching movies on cable all the time. And this definitely seems like one of those ones that maybe was in cable land for a while and then unavailable for a bit.
Yeah.
Well, I, for one, am filled with jealous rage that you get to go see this at an Alamo Drafthouse because I'm currently in Tennessee right now near my girlfriend's family. And as we did a little Google searching, just figured out there's an Alamo Drafthouse in every direction about 7 hours from me. So it looks like the good folks at Starz are going to get a subscription out of me just so I can watch the Burbs. The things I do for my podcast, Shawn.
I mean, this is the first one that we've run into this issue where you didn't own it or it wasn't streaming somewhere. I have the Blu-ray from Shout Factory. They have a very good upgraded one on Blu-ray if you're looking for it via Shout. Yeah, it's funny that this one became an issue for everybody. But of course, Becky lucks out with like the luckiest version of it all. It's like, I can't wait to hear the story about how you guys get kicked out of the draft house because you're turning your phone on to write little notes in the pitch black. And people
No, I would never. I would never. I will tell people to put their phone away. I'm kidding.
We are all those people. I got onto somebody at the LA one the last time I was there. I was like, no, seriously, stop or I'll send a little note.
Becky, this movie pairs very well with a peanut butter milkshake and a pepperoni pizza, just so you're aware.
Oh, you've mentioned like the 2 things I would never order.
What? Those are the 2 best things at the draft house.
I'm sorry, but I am okay with pepperoni. I never want just a pepperoni pizza. I have to have other meat on it. I never get just pepperoni. And I'm not a huge peanut butter person, so I don't know. I know. I'm awful.
I used to like Becky before this podcast started. I'm all for putting more meat on a pizza, but their pepperoni pizza specifically is very good. So that's my peanut butter milkshake and a pepperoni pizza is my general draft house order, which is why I'm in such good shape.
I was about to say that explains a few things.
That explains why I take the fat phobic movies we keep watching very seriously because I feel seen.
Let's just say Cameron and I are the Rick Ducommun of this trio. Becky, you could be the Tom Hanks or the Brewster.
Actually, what the hell is a Rick Ducommun?
He is a forgotten actor that did a bunch of small parts in the 80s, including the friend in this movie. I keep forgetting you don't know this movie well enough.
Yeah, I'm going to learn a few things too, Becky. We're in this together. Some would say we're both the guests this time around, or at least that's what I'm going to try to do so I don't have to.
There you go.
Well, because
you're already putting in so much work, right?
Exactly.
To see the movie to begin with.
Right? I mean,
this is exciting then because it's somewhat new to both of you.
Yeah, I'm actually really, despite the fact that I'm literally going to have to get stars in order to watch it, which is infuriating. Although now I guess I can get caught up on Power or whatever that show's called. Yeah, take that, stars. A shot at Power. But yeah, I am really excited to watch this movie because it has been a really long time and I've been wanting to rewatch it. And one of the things I love about this podcast is it allows me to go back and watch stuff that I haven't seen for a while. Most of them so far I remember a lot better than I remember the Burbs. So Becky, I'm going to go on this trip with you a little bit, but I'll still maintain my host responsibilities and let you be the guest.
I'm excited to go on this journey with you. And apparently a lot of other people were excited because I went to buy tickets and it was nearly sold out at the Draft House on like a Sunday afternoon showing. And it's playing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I was surprised by that. And I told Brad, I'm like, well, I guess it really is a classic from the 80s then. I wasn't sure, how zeitgeisty it was or how mainstream it was. But the fact that it's basically sold out, I guess, for, a rep screening of a 1989 movie on a Sunday afternoon, I think that is testament.
Well, to be fair, this may be the last time anyone ever gets to see it on account of it doesn't exist on the earth right now. So if you don't watch it at the Draft House, it's either you have to go to the Draft House on a Sunday afternoon or you have to get freaking stars for a month. So pick your poison, Becky.
Take a shot every time Cameron complains about stars.
Oh, you're going to get hammered. Like if you're listening and you take a shot every time I say stars, I do not want responsibility for you going to the hospital during this episode. So
don't take a shot every time.
Stars gave us not just Power, but Power has spinoffs like Ghost. Apparently, there's other shows.
What is
Power was exactly? Cameron.
I don't think I've ever had Stars, so I don't know any of the shows on Stars.
I had it years ago, and it is responsible for one of, arguably, in my opinion, one of the great 21st century sitcoms of all time, which is Party Down. So Stars is allowed to be here. Stars is allowed to stick around. Don't make fun of Stars.
I've got a month of Stars to watch, so hopefully they've got other stuff besides the Burbs.
Well, you can tap into your suburban house mom vibe and watch Outlander, that apparently a lot of women are very into.
I have no idea what that is.
You don't know what it is?
Oh my gosh, Cameron is out of the loop of what the over 50 ladies crowd watches. And also my wife.
Oh, nice shot of your wife there. The over 50 crowd, huh?
Outlander was adapted by Ronald D. Moore, who did Battlestar Galactica and a bunch of other good things. It's not a bad show.
Why is it popular?
I've heard it's actually good.
Why is it popular with women specifically?
Because it's about a lady who makes sweet, sweet love to a Scottish Highlander.
Oh. Well, I'm in.
And travels through time.
Wish fulfillment. Wish fulfillment's why.
Oh, so it's like Twilight, but for adults.
Yeah.
No,
it's not at all.
I thought I was going to get someone there, but
every fanfic is like Twilight, except they have sex and they're not like repressed, crazy, not having sex people.
This is going to be like a 4-hour episode.
Let's wrap it up and send Becky on her way to a nice theater with nice food that does not include peanut butter and pepperoni only. Let's send Cameron to get his Star subscription and bitch and moan the whole way about it, and me to my Shout Factory Blu-ray, since apparently I can't watch it on streaming either. So
I feel like Stars should have to sponsor this episode. Stars, if you're listening, you should sponsor this episode, and I'll keep the subscription forever.
You heard it here. We will return in just a moment here to get the Stars hater and Becky's fresh thoughts on this film and much more. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Hey there, welcome back. What was mere seconds for you, the listener, was a good deal more for us. When we last left off, our guest Becky Sayers had not seen the Burbs. She was late to the party, but at least she made it. We welcome her back, a more cultured individual, more learned film viewer now, someone who can not only knock off another Joe Dante film, but another Tom Hanks film and another Corey Feldman film off of their endless watch list. Someone who's now seen the 1989 film The Burbs. Becky Sayers, are you feeling any or all of those things now?
Yes. I feel far more cultured. I feel more well prepared to exist in my suburban neighborhood. So yeah, right. I'm good.
You also now know why Bruce Dern is a national treasure.
Well, I knew that before, but I guess it's further cemented that place.
That's fair. So let's jump right into it. Was it what you thought it was going to be?
Yes and no. I didn't know a lot about the plot details. I just knew that it was a black comedy, dark comedy about the suburbs. I thought it was going to be more of a satire than it was. It certainly is satirical, but I thought it was going to lean harder into that and not be as much about the direct storyline, kind of like the mystery of uncovering what's going on with the neighbors. And it had a little more like screwball comedy, I guess, than I was expecting. A little more like slapsticky moments. Nothing too over the top, but I didn't know what I was in for, so that surprised me a little bit.
Right. In Joe Dante fashion, he somehow toes that line better than most directors, though, where it does out of nowhere go like the zoom in moment with the femur bone, like,
that was one of my favorite moments in the movie. Loved it. It somehow was very Joe Dante, too. Like it fit. And it fit the film, even though there's nothing else. It's pretty traditionally shot, except for that one moment.
I found myself wondering, because again, like we talked about, I hadn't seen this movie in quite some time either. And I found myself wondering what this movie would have felt like if Tim Burton directed it. Like, to me, there's like a really great, like Tim Burton in his prime Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands version of this movie that would just be kind of insane.
It's interesting you say that because this movie, the way we talked about how Monster Squad and Goonies are kind of 1-2 in our minds if we grew up with them together, this and Beetlejuice have always been like a weird 1-2 in my brain. But not only does the movie get compared to that, but it's got that kind of Twilight Zone, the monsters are due on Maple Drive kind of paranoia and the suburbs thing too. But to me, the movie feels like it could be Zemeckis and even partly a little bit Spielberg too, just in the vibe. But I think it's interesting you thought Burton.
Well, it's not that I thought Burton so much as like I felt like, so there's like a weird thing going on here where like there's not a whole lot of plot to speak of, really. It's just kind of what's going on in next door. But like it dances around different kinds of movies, kind of like you talked about. So like there are parts of it that feel very Joe Dante, and there are parts of it that feel very Steven Spielberg, and there are parts of it that feel very Tim Burton. And I feel like any one of those guys could have taken, like, this movie would be a great like short film prompt, like, hey, 10 directors, go make this movie and just tell them the basic plot. And I think you come back with a lot of different takes on it because it doesn't beat you over the head with plot. I mean, it really is kind of one note in the sense that like, we think something shady is happening next door. We're going to investigate. That's basically the plot, right? So like, it felt like certain parts danced up to the Tim Burton thing. And I would have loved to have seen it go further that direction, or at least would have been interested to see what that movie would have been.
I think one of the interesting things about it is that it almost feels like a stage play because it all takes place in one location in this neighborhood, right? It's all shot on a lot. Mm-hmm. So it has that feel that's kind of adjacent to an Edward Scissorhands, a very Tim Burton sort of heightened reality, but it just doesn't take it to that stylized level. But it still has this feeling of like I'm watching like this alternate reality stage play in front of me. So maybe that's where some of that feeling is coming from. And also just like the classic sort of something's wrong in suburbia sort of scenario.
Yeah, it's also got it's like it dances around being a dark comedy and ultimately most of the time settles for being a broad comedy, which is, I guess, probably what happens when you're making studio movies. But it dances around, I think, wanting to be more Heathers, more Tim Burton, more stuff like that. And I feel like it almost pulls punches in the sense that it stays broad when it doesn't have to. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's still a really good movie, but like it just felt like it wanted to be darker than it was, I guess is where I'm going with it. As someone who hasn't seen it for a really long time.
Yeah, to me, I still think it balances that well because this was considered a big studio comedy, and there is a cynicism and a darkness to it, which it was still somewhat atypical in that mode. It was only a year after Beetlejuice, and even that toes the line of like very Americana meets very macabre. So I think this kind of is in that vein. And I do think as a resident ex-Universal employee, I must chime in on what Becky said. If you folks ever take the tram tour at Universal, you will go down this little road. It's called Colonial Street. It's Leave It to Beaver, doubles as Wisteria Lane on Desperate Housewives. And I do believe they kept the Mayfield Place sign as a nod to Leave It to Beaver because there's a shot that kind of comes in on the neighborhood where you see the street sign. But, the Animal House, Delta House is on that lot. The Munsters Mansion's on that lot. Rob Zombie used the Firefly family's house and the first House of a Thousand Corpses there, which he later rebuilt for the sequel. But yes, there's your factoids about Colonial Street at Universal. Take the tram tour.
I love that.
Now who's what happened to no free ads on this podcast, Shawn? That was like a 2-minute.
It's a Universal movie we're talking about. I mean, so I guess it works.
Well, I'm still mad at Universal right now, so I don't know if we want to talk about that. But they tried like hell, as we discussed, to hide this movie from me. And so I'm still a little upset about it.
Yeah. Before we go further into weeds, Becky, real quick, can Cam first apologize to the fine people at the Starz Network who, it turns out, did not do Mr. Burns wrong, but it was simply just the internet lying about the whereabouts of this film because, as we talked about in the open, the location of which it turns out, digitally at least, is nowhere. This movie was nowhere. Cameron had to go do old school searching.
I will not apologize to the people of Starz the same way I did not apologize to the submersible people from episode Titanic. But I will say, I'm not bringing it back. I'm not mad at you necessarily, Starz. I'm mad at Universal or whoever owns the rights to this because Starz doesn't have it, so they're not a part of the solution. They're part of the problem. But the problem is this movie literally exists nowhere. Like it cannot be streamed anywhere for rental, for purchase, for free if you have the app. I mean, I was ready to pay to get Starz. I had committed to the cause and it wasn't on there. And like, I had to go to the library, the public library, to find this movie, which is insane in the year 2024 that I couldn't find a movie except by going to the public library. Like, think about it.
Almost overnighted a DVD and a player to you.
Yeah. It's
almost came to it.
This is an right now, this episode is an advertisement for physical media because
indeed,
if you don't own this movie and you aren't Becky and lucky enough to go see it at the Draft House, then you're not watching the Burbs. You're just not, unless your public library is coming through. So I will not apologize to Starz, but what I will do is big shout out to the public library system for having DVDs.
Very good. And to the point about Becky seeing it the way she saw it, we'd mentioned it at the top too. How was the screening? You said it was pretty filled up, I think, when you were buying tickets. Did Brad find it somewhat still holding up to him after not seeing it for a while too, or no?
Oh, yeah, he loved it. He recalled that he loved the movie, was excited to revisit it, and walked away feeling like it really held up to his expectations and his memory of the movie. And it seemed like the audience did as well. There was a lot of laughter. It's also really just fun to watch something like that on the big screen around other people, especially when you're watching a comedy, because the laughter is indeed contagious. And at the end of the film, people were literally cheering, which is great because at a rep screening at the Draft House, it's a little more lax with that kind of where you're allowed to emote a bit more with the movie. So it was great to see everything still hold up to, I think a lot of the audience had seen the movie before, was my guess, because I kind of heard people whispering coming in saying, oh, this is going to be great. I'm so excited to see this again. People saying things like that or bringing other people that hadn't seen it. And like, I can't wait to show this to you kind of a vibe. At least that's what I picked up from, listening to the chatter. So it was fantastic and great to see on the big screen. I'm really fortunate that I didn't have to watch it on a tiny little screen from a computer or, go all the way down to the library to check out a DVD.
It was a real chore. I do think that, like, not to get too far on a side tangent here, but I do think as we continue to struggle with movies making money in the theater and stuff coming to streaming faster and faster, I would love to see that supplemented some by having more and more repertory screenings. I think we're getting a little bit of that, and they seem to do quite well. But I would love to get back to a world where repertory screenings are all over the place and you get to see stuff that you haven't seen on a big screen before more and more often. I think the Draft House has always been really great with that, but I'd love to see all the theater chains and all the studios really kind of pushing that as an alternative for new movies that come out. I think there's a market there.
For sure. As Becky's worked with like some film festivals with Brad, including Telluride, they can tell you just Disney buying Fox was bad for a number of reasons, but boy, did they make it harder to get the Fox library for rep screenings. In fact, some theaters will tell you right when you try to do like a private event booking or something, it's like, we cannot grab a Disney or Fox movie. Don't even ask. So yeah, you don't want these companies to do giant mergers like that because it does make it harder, but it is good to know that there's still a decent amount of them out there in some of the major studios like Universal. You can still get them upon request.
Okay, now let's talk about the real thing that everybody wants to know. Becky, did you get the pepperoni pizza?
I did not get the pepperoni pizza.
Becky, you had one job.
So the screening, like we got to the theater around 3, so it wasn't lunch, it wasn't dinner time. So I just got a side of fries, and I tried their new the raspberry bramble, which I think it's new. I don't remember that being on the menu before. It's like a raspberry gin based cocktail, very summery. It was delicious.
Well, that sounds very fancy, but right? you were supposed to get the pepperoni pizza,
and the peanut butter milkshake. I know,
and the peanut butter milkshake. So find some time, go watch Challengers or the Fall Guy, and let's fix that blind spot next. Your blind spot for peanut butter milkshake.
The 2 movies you just mentioned are exactly the problem that you stated prior, which is things going to streaming way faster. But
probably why they were on my brain. But yes,
no, that's okay. My brain was going, whoa, raspberry, bramble-lamb. But that's where I went.
I was trying to figure out what a bramble was until she said it was a cocktail. Now I know what a bramble is.
I was just eating like thorns.
Yeah,
the table,
that's what
the bramble bushes. Yeah,
or where Peter Cottontail lived in the bramble.
I was throwing down a wall of brambles. Magic card.
I told you, Shawn. I told you this was going to be like a 2-hour episode because we were never going to stay on task. With Becky.
No, I mean, with you two, devolving into food talk is not uncommon as I co-host a pod with each of you.
Right. This is a Taco Bell podcast, right?
Eventually, all podcasts will be Taco Bell podcasts.
Where I go, Taco Bell surely follows, Becky. Know that. So let's get this bad boy back on track.
Let's go back. Let's start at the very beginning, in fact.
Let's do that.
I do love that the opening played with the Universal logo, zooming all the way into middle America, all the way down to the neighborhood street that seemed somewhere in the Midwest. I think it's meant to be just Anytown, USA, sort of in the middle. But yeah, and then the movie does a fun little bit at the end where it zooms right back out, kind of reverses that shot.
I thought that was very cool.
Is that one of the first? Sorry, no, it's okay. Is that one of the first times that Universal had done that with their logo?
I'd have to check into who did it first, but yeah, as Universal ones go, all the ones I think have come after that one, Waterworld being one I always remember being notable. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there's a list of like the first time they ever played with the logos, because Saul Bass even kind of did some funny bits with the logos back in the day for Warner and other. So good question. Don't have an answer.
We don't do research, Becky. We come into this with the bare minimum.
I put a note down about how I liked how they did that. But,
we didn't dig any further than that.
I did too, and I guess the thought when the old school logo came up, one of the old school Universal logos came up. One of my thoughts when I saw it was, it's nice to see that logo in a theater and know that it was like actually original to that time too, because now people throw up, retro Universal logos in movies all the time, and to set tone if it takes place, in the 80s or the 1940s, they'll use some of the old classic ones. So when I saw it, it was weird that my mind went to, retro Universal logo. Wait, no, this is the time this movie actually took place in. But I did love that
of Blu-rays and DCPs, a lot of times they're sending it with the modern logo, even if it had an originally older logo, which is also a funky thing that throws you off, where you see the modern one attached to like a 70s movie.
Yeah, I think the fact that it has its own special kind of opening is probably the reason you got that. There is a world where if that didn't exist and it was just a generic logo with nothing attached to it, that you may have just gotten the current logo, which would have been a lot less exciting. So, thanks, Joe Dante. You were ahead of the game, probably. Speaking of Joe Dante, that guy's made a bunch of awesome movies. Where does this kind of fall on the Joe Dante scale for everybody?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
I mean, I think we can all agree that Gremlins is Joe Dante's best movie. And if we can't agree on that, then we should probably just end this podcast and agree not to be friends anymore.
I think Becky and I have mentioned on the other show that I have a very big soft spot for The Howling. I know people love American Werewolf, but The Howling to me is just like as much of a nostalgia bomb as that movie is when I see it and see clips from it. Gremlins, I would say, and Joe Dante himself has said Gremlins is his most, asked about movie, but second only to Gremlins is this movie. He said it's got a very strange loyal following. And I think we're going back to, it resonating with just suburbia and paranoia and stuff. But he does get asked about this one more than any other movie, save Gremlins.
Not Small Soldiers.
Well, there's no accounting for taste, Becky, and Small Soldiers is true greatness, as we all know. But the world hasn't caught up to that. Like, I think Small Soldiers is going to be like the next Halloween 3, where people will eventually realize its greatness. I have a real soft spot for Matinee with John Goodman. I think that's a very underappreciated Joe Dante film.
Agreed.
I actually haven't seen it.
Oh,
so there's
you did not let me know that
episode.
when we name checked it on the most recent Paper Street podcast. I actually name checked Matinee, and you just flew right past it, and I assumed you'd seen it.
I don't call out everything I haven't
I know, I'm kidding. It's all good. No, soft spots for me are definitely this one, Explorers and Interspace, because again, they were just like cable mainstays. I saw them so much as a kid.
Interspace is really cool.
Shawn, I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh, he's going to say he's never seen Interspace.
No, I have seen Interspace. I've never seen Explorers.
Oh, you definitely threw me with that one. I'm going to go text Farrell Rose right now because that movie even came up when we were talking Goonies and Monster Squad.
Yeah, well, I should say, I if I did, there's a world where I have seen it, but I don't remember it. But it's been, that one's been a little bit of a blind spot for me for a while, which is kind of surprising given what else it's like. I may have seen it, but I don't. If I've seen it, I don't remember seeing it.
Baby Ethan Hawke, Baby River Phoenix.
That's not the one where they go to space camp and then go to space, right? That's space camp.
That's Space Camp.
Okay, just making sure.
Titanic's not that movie where the Titanic sinks, right?
Can we also talk about how good Space Camp is? Sorry, Becky, but that's a good movie.
See, you say that. Does that hold up? Because in my brain, there's no way that movie holds up.
Oh, I'm sure it doesn't. I haven't seen Space Camp since I was 10, probably. But I used to love that movie.
I was going to say we haven't mentioned Piranha yet, too.
Also very
Joe Dante catalog.
Yeah, no, we've talked before about, I think I said that, Becky, on the Paper Street Pod, like over time, I started to realize, like, I think I vibe with him more than even Zemeckis and Spielberg when you take their whole oeuvre kind of, as far as like the 80s stuff that really hit me and just the cable mainstay type of movies that I saw over and over. I was like, this Dante guy has stuff I really like, and that weird tonal balance of somewhere between Burton and somewhere between Zemeckis and all that, where he does play with satire, with horror, with comedy, with all of it. And Small Soldiers, to your point, Cameron, every single movie now is getting the reassessment, because if you saw it when you were at the right age, it's a part of you. Now people are like, those original Fantastic Four movies are great. I'm like, no, you saw them when you were 10, but they're doing that with every movie now. Like,
it's getting a little out of hand. It's getting a little out of hand, but I do think Small Soldiers could be one that, because that's not a movie that people, I think, look back at particularly fondly, but I do think that's a pretty
Thank you for agreeing with me, because all this does is validate what I've said about the movie Hook since I was 12 years old.
Which is what?
Not great.
Why does that?
Everybody 5 years younger than me says Hook is like the greatest movie. I'm like, no, you were the right age when you saw it. It is not.
I don't think everyone says that.
Be shocked.
I don't think I've ever had anyone.
Elder millennials, man. That movie's part of their DNA.
It is. Because I think everybody saw it, the whole Rufio thing. And it's a thing. It's a thing. People love Hook.
Do they?
They do. Yeah. Cam, see, you're closer to my age. You're getting it now. Everybody just a smidge younger than you thinks the movies 5 years later were all the greatest things. It never ends. Anyway, back to the Burbs, so we don't make this into our show. But yes, Joe Dante. Yeah, the pedigree of this is very good. Produced by Grazer and Ron Howard. It was a very early Imagine Entertainment production. I think this was one of their first 5 or 6 features they did. The writer, Dana Olson, does not have like the greatest resume. He adapted George of the Jungle and Inspector Gadget. He did Memoirs of the Invisible Man, the Carpenter Memoirs movie. But he based this kind of on his own weird, very normal suburbia childhood, where he would read in the paper like, oh, there's a killer down the street. And he's like, what? Everything else seems very normal. It's like, find out like librarian kills himself and family. And so he kind of pitched it as Ozzie and Harriet meets Charles Manson. And the actual pitch to the studio also it was kind of pitching it as a send up a Rear Window, which makes sense when you think about it too, the paranoia of looking across the street and all.
Yeah, it is kind of Rear Window-esque, which is funny because then this was out for a while, and then I would guess that the movie Suburbia was probably someone saying it's like the Burbs, but more serious.
Are you thinking of Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm thinking of Disturbia.
Because there is a movie called Suburbia also.
Yeah, I was confused there.
I knew where Cameron's brain went.
Sorry, but both movies, this movie and that movie, both have Mickey Cat, so you can see why I would be confused. But yes, Suburbia also a very good Giovanni Ribisi coming-of-age movie. But no, yes, Disturbia is what I meant. That's also a better than you remember movie, by the way.
I feel like the pitch for Disturbia was it's a modern Rear Window, not so much.
Yeah, it's way
the Burbs,
closer.
but serious. That would be my guess is what went down in the pitching
Becky,
room.
How dare you? No one in that pitching room had heard of Rear Window by then.
Old news.
Don't assume executives have heard of anything that's over 20 years old is the way I look at it. So yeah,
the 80s executives all did because that whole group, De Palma, Spielberg, and everybody were still aping Hitchcock. But yeah, by the time 20 years later Disturbia came out, they were like, who?
I don't even think film school students now know what a Hitchcock is.
Let's not get into how much nobody looks at old stuff anymore. Just rip off old movies, guys.
Is this turning into a get off my lawn?
Oh yeah,
in
Shawn and I
line with this film, white flight suburban paranoia. We're all guilty.
Yes. Exactly.
We're all guilty. Cameron and I will fight over which of us is the Ducommun, which of us is the Hanks, but you're definitely the
I thought I was the Bruce Dern.
Oh no, Becky grew up in the woods, and like if she had to, she'd be all militaristic and like turn on everybody and take it all over.
I bet Becky would fall hilariously off a house.
Oh, you know it. There's no other way to fall off a house.
One of the great house falls, or just falls in general.
Just pratfalls in film history, yeah.
Just all kinds of stuff going flying in the air. It was like,
hey, Mr. Roseboro. He just like stumbles and does like a few flips.
I
laugh out loud every time.
I love Corey Feldman, friend of the show, Corey Feldman. I love that he does nothing but watch what's happening the whole movie. He's just like he has no stake in the movie. He's not a part of it. He doesn't do anything, but he just watches.
He's not even like giving exposition. He straight up is just like an onlooker and doesn't even like fill in gaps of like information. He's just like,
if you took him out of the movie, it would not change the movie at all, except it would make it less funny because he has some funny stuff in there.
The pizza dude lines over and over again. That was my favorite Corey Feldman.
Which is also eerie to hear Corey Feldman, voice of Donatello in two of the Turtles movies, yell pizza, dude.
I think is that, well, wait, timeline wise, I guess.
90 was Ninja Turtles 1, so he did it right on the heels of this one.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. He was manifesting a reality.
Right.
Or maybe he already knew he was going to be cast in that and was like, it'd be great.
So Becky,
it'd be great. Pepperoni pizza, dude, at Draft House.
Pepperoni pizza at Draft House. Yeah, that's right. You should eat that, Becky. You should go back, watch another movie, and eat that. But what you may not know, Becky, is that this movie gave Corey Feldman friend of the show status. So you have to be in multiple movies that we've talked about to become a friend of the show. We did a Lost Boys episode, and
I listened to that one.
BURBS. Oh, really? That's exciting. Yeah, he joins.
You're talking to a fan. She and I quote nice worms more than normal people.
I didn't know people actually listened to the episode. But yeah, he joins Jonathan Hyde, David Warner, John Lithgow, Francis Lee McCain, and Diane Wiest as friends of the show.
Woo!
That's exciting times.
Document on a website coming soon.
That's right. We need a tracker.
Indeed. So we mentioned some of the cast. Let's knock out some of the bigger guns. Tom Hanks, of course, at his most annoyed and disaffected suburbanite. Just the whole movie is just him falling apart slowly.
Yeah, this is like pure sitcom Hanks. This is like that early version of Hanks who was just like hilarious sitcom dad. Like,
right on his way to A-list.
Everyday man that, is just on the verge of boiling over the top.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he kills it in this. He kills it.
Also, just his little motions like flipping right in the opening scene, flipping the coffee at the newsboy and stuff. Just nonstop little funny physical humor from him.
Yeah, he was really great. And I know we talked about how in the first episode I didn't know who Rick Ducommun was. I now, having seen the movie, I'm like, oh, that guy, Rick Ducommun. I've seen him in pretty much everything. Little Monsters, Groundhog Day, Die Hard, Spaceballs. I mean, he's like
Bruce Campbell. The bigger the movie, the smaller the role. It's like he's kind of like a Bleak and You'll Miss It bits in Die Hard and Spaceballs. But I think I said to Cam off air, like he's got this like John-Candy meets Tom Wilson's Biff energy about him in this movie.
Totally.
He thinks he's in a broad comedy. For sure. Like he's just throwing zingers left and right. He gives like big like can't afford Belushi or candy, go get yourself some Ducommun. Like he was like the knockoff version of that, which I kind of love.
But I actually thought it worked so well in this movie. actually got the biggest laughs in the theater. Like his delivery, his whole, like from the moment he shows up, you know exactly who this guy is, as he's like raiding the fridge and just like getting the ribs out at breakfast and eating them. It's so funny.
He's got big sitcom neighbor energy.
Yeah.
Like he comes in like Kramer and just like chews the scenery and then says all the best lines and then leaves. Like he's the wacky zany sitcom neighbor, and he's got all the best lines. When we'll get to some memorable lines in a little bit, but he's got most of them. I mean, in a movie with Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher and Bruce Dern and Corey Feldman, to be the scene stealer is not insignificant.
It's not what I was expecting. That's for sure.
Also, I spent the whole movie wondering who the hell Wendy Shaw was. Like I recognized her, but I couldn't place her the whole time. Who plays Bruce Dern's wife? I can't remember her name in the movie, but
Bonnie Rumsfeld.
Bonnie Rumsfeld. She the whole time I was like, I know her from somewhere, and then I ended up knowing her from a couple different places. But she was really great in the movie, and it's like it's kind of sad that she didn't blow up more. She kind of towed the line from between like being like the quintessential one note 80s bimbo, but like with a lot more going for her and like a much more interesting character. So I thought that role was kind of ahead of its time, or at least it felt like it was to me.
I don't
know if I'd go that far. But
I mean, look, I'm not saying she was like doing Shakespeare, but I felt like, I don't know. I felt like she was more of a character than that character normally is.
That's fair.
I agree. And I actually had a conversation with Brad about her character because I thought the way they introduce her as like the kind of like hot lady bimbo, sort of the neighborhood where she's like gardening in her bikini for some reason.
No tan lines.
Then I thought, but what was the point of that? Obviously, it's the 80s. That's the point of it, I guess. But I thought maybe it would factor into the plot somehow. Like, oh, they're going to have a moment where she goes to try and seduce the neighbors. At least then it would make sense story-wise for that to be like a character thing. But they never address like her age gap with Bruce Dern, or the fact that I think it was more just to be visually comedic, like a visual gag.
Well, I would argue that they also set her up as a character that she kind of didn't play for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, she's very reasonable.
Like they set her up, like in that first scene, they set her up like she is going to be the bimbo eye candy. Yeah. And then she very quickly becomes like Carrie Fisher's friend and someone we trust to go into the house. And like, there's just like the character, it was just a weird setup. Like it was setting up a different, maybe that's a thing that they cut way back in post, maybe. Yeah, I did feel like it kind of set up a character that ultimately didn't. I
think it was underdeveloped and they used her as a visual punchline and like didn't really like flesh out her characters. Kind of like my perspective on it. They're like, oh, we need some,
I would argue that most of the movie's underdeveloped, and I don't mean that as like a shot at. I still think it's a really good movie because there's so many talented people involved. But I do think like it's a very ripe idea that I don't think that they fully fleshed out, and I think they just relied on the fact that that this really great director and this really great cast will kind of get it there. But I do think there's just a better, not to jump around or whatever, but I do think there's just a better version of this movie that's darker and a little more fucked up. And I don't know. I felt like it's a good movie, and I understand why people like it, especially if they saw it at a certain age. But I do think it kind of pulls its punches, and it never ascended to like greatness for me. Like it was the kind of thing that I watched and I was like, oh yeah, I haven't seen this in a while. This is fun. And it's fun throughout. The tech cast is really good, but it could have been really, really great, I think. And I think it just settled for being fun. Like, obviously, this is a movie from, I don't know, what year is this movie from, Shawn?
89.
So from 89. So I'm judging it in retrospect, which is always dangerous. But I don't know. I do feel like it's a good movie that could have been a great movie.
So something I didn't put in the notes, I don't know if Becky found this when scouring the internet about the movie, but there was an actual strike going on during filming. So there's a ton of improv from everybody in the movie, which is part of what helps kind of carry it along. Because, there's a chance the script was a smidge underdeveloped and could have used a little more polish, but they had to basically go into production with what they had.
That makes sense to me.
The improving certainly elevated some of it. But to that point about that, we'll get back to some of the cast, but some of the line readings we talk about, like Ray, I guess in real life, Rick Ducommun was driving Tom Hanks nuts because he was kind of just overbearing and all that. So it plays throughout the movie, and it's so believable because by the end of it, when he's screaming at him, he's like, "No, we're the lunatics, Art, not us, them." And Ray just looks at him after a beat and is like, "What do you want me to do? Move?" Just
I love
probably my favorite line of the movie. The other line that just like immediately floored me, the only one I actually wrote down so I can make sure I talked about it, was in the bin. This is like the classic Art Ducommun line where he's just like, they find that thermostat thing in the basement. He's like, "Oh, a thermostat on a home unit. Is that supposed to go up to 5,000 degrees, you think?"
Oh, yeah.
That was the funniest line. He delivered it like was of all the lines to deliver straight that he never does. Like delivering that one straight was so funny to me. I
agree. That got the biggest laugh in the theater. That made me laugh more than any other line. It's so much to do with the way he delivers that line. Like a genuine question: is a home thermostat?
Yeah, like he was just like he was doing shtick before, but here he's genuinely curious. Yeah, and I thought that was so funny. I just like that
asking
line,
in earnest.
Yeah, like that line was so funny. Like it had to have been improv. It had to have, because he delivered it so understated that it just like. But yeah, the I love the Hanks kind of monologue where he's kind of freaking out and realizing that they're not the bad guys, we're the bad guys. Like that, I was really into it. And like to me, that thesis is the thing that's kind of underdeveloped. You know what I mean? Like and I also think it's undercut by the fact that, spoiler warning, the bad guys are actually bad. I think the better version of this movie, the bad guys aren't bad. And
are we going to get into the ending later?
No, sure? Becky, we have no plans here. You just
we can bounce around. What do you have to say about the ending? I'm curious because I have a question for you,
Cameron. But like,
no, you're good.
I do agree with what you're saying. I think the whole speech is undercut immediately by like. It has this great sort of anti-xenophobic message behind it, but then it turns around and just like reinforces the xenophobia by saying, "Oh yeah, the people that were different after all were actually killers the whole time."
Yeah.
But I did read that there were different endings originally, and I think in the original script there was one version, I think, where they are indeed innocent and like that whole thing with the ambulance never happens. And then I think it's the original script version has Tom Hanks' character gets killed.
Yeah.
But then the Klopeks are found innocent, and the last shot is like him stuffed in the garbage. Like, because, the whole time they're thinking that Walter's body is in the garbage.
That's the darker version Cameron wants to make.
That's really dark. But
I don't like. I just think that like Hank's dying, I could take or leave. I mean, him coming back felt a little studio notey, but like there's this great message of like these people aren't the problem. People Karening their neighbors are like this thing is ripe to be remade or rethought out. Like the dark horror adjacent, but like more dark comedy, like Heather's style comedy version of this, like with all the Karen stuff that we've seen in the last like 5 years or whatever on the internet, it's like it's that turned up to 100, and it's like these people with too much time on their hands, someone different moves in, they become convinced that they're doing something and they're actually not, and they're the bad guys. The dark comedy, more horror pointing version of that could be fire.
I will have to say there is kind of a movie that exists like that. Tucker and Dale versus Evil is basically that, right? Where it's like, except it's funnier because they kill themselves in all these bizarre ways because they assume that they are slashers, but it's kind of the same premise.
Yeah, Tucker and Dale's, I hadn't made that connection, but I do think Tucker and Dale's kind of dancing around that same premise. But I do think what Tucker and Dale doesn't really have that this does, and that I would, if somebody gave me the blank check and make this thing, is like the suburbia of it. The
Karens, the people for sure.
The people who don't let other people just live their lives and want to be involved in everybody's shit. Like those people thinking they're the good guys and starting out as like, I think there's a world where they start out as these like sitcom-y character or fun characters, and then pretty soon you're just like, oh wait, these are the assholes. These are the bad guys. I'm following the bad guys. Like
Seinfeld.
Like, yeah, that like.
And look how mad people got that finale for 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's a cool version
That's the thing. I mean, it was a little studio in a way. It was once it was Tom Hanks, they were like, we can't kill him off because that is a whole different movie. I don't dislike that idea as going that route. You either go dark where like the bad guys get away with it, or you have them be innocent. But the way this worked out, I wanted to ask Becky, did you see that Walter's showing back up at all? Because I still think that's a fun twist that totally undercuts the audience. Like there's never a thought that like they didn't actually kill Walter.
Yeah, I assumed Walter wasn't dead because.
Oh, you did.
I did.
Yeah.
You've seen it once.
Figured.
Yeah, but I didn't remember Walter.
Yeah, I figured that just based off of like what I knew, like, I don't know, movie. Like I just was like, oh, there's going to be a twist where he's not really dead. And it hasn't, they didn't really do like the best job convincing. And instead I thought that was part of the joke is they have barely any evidence around this, but they are so convinced because of their ethnocentrism or whatever you want to call it.
I'm with you. Yeah, watching it now with you guys as this rewatch, I've seen it many times, but watching it, thinking about that now, I'm like, oh no, that was the first time that it showed that, oh no, we're wrong. You're right. At the very end, when Corey Feldman shows the bones, you're like, oh, it does kind of undercut some of it, but I think they sort of just were at a place in 1989 where they had to still kind of keep the ending that we got. But I don't disagree with you guys.
Can we talk about the fact that they were driving around with a car that had roughly the bones of, I don't know, 130 people in the trunk? Like, the
Knapp family might have been Catholics, man. There might have been like 8 or 9 of them.
What? Like, what in the world? Like, it's not like you expect, he pulls back the thing and you expect there's going to be like a dead body. And it's just like, it looks like a pirate's treasure of bones. There's just so much of it. It was just such a weird thing when that happened. I was just like, oh, I guess these people are killing in high volumes and for some reason leaving them in the trunk. But I do like that he comes back. It's like the fact that they killed the family makes sense. Like that was foreshadowed well. But I do think, like, I don't know. To me, the cooler version is the family didn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the fact that I definitely, at no point did I think that they had killed the neighbor.
Also, in true 80s fashion, a modern movie would have had 20 minutes of us meeting that family disappearing, the new family moving in. I love that the 80s of it all just, it starts with like, hey, there's weird neighbors next door. What the hell?
Yeah,
I think a lot of movies now can learn from that. Is like get in as late as possible, get out as early as possible. I think this movie got in as late as possible. What it didn't do is get out as early as possible. It fell to we've got to finesse the ending and add some tack-ons and stuff like that. But yeah, I love that it started with just like, see, there's some lights in the basement. They're clearly weirdos. Like that's all I needed to go on that trip. Like we didn't need anything else. That's like very economic filmmaking right there.
Yeah, it's something anybody can relate to because we've all looked out at our neighbors and wondered, like, what the hell are they doing? Or maybe you talk a little shit about them. Like, you know, like some people maybe say, oh, their lawn doesn't look great. I wish they would do something with their lawn. Or saying like, gosh, they're like always having people over really late. You know, people make these sort of judgments from the other side of the street all the time. So it's taking those little bits of familiarity that everyone can probably relate to in some sort of way, but then just cranking it up to 11. So what sort of exposition do you really need?
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And then speaking of the crazy family, the Klopeks, Henry Gibson, recognizable character actor, played the doctor of the family. He was in the original Nutty Professor, Altman's Nashville. He's head Nazi as he's credited in the Blues Brothers. And then Becky is a fan of some other Dante movies like Gremlins and The Terminator. Dick Miller is one of the garbage men along with Robert Picardo.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Gail Gordon, who played Walter, was Mr. Mooney, Lucy's boss on the Lucy Show years and years.
Who was the doctor's brother with the weird fluffy hair? Not the young kid, not the doctor, the third guy, the uncle or whatever. Who was the doctor?
He's credited in the movie as Brother Theodore, but I know he has like a full name.
Is he nobody? He's not never anything else. His hair just like blew my mind. Like every time he was on screen, I just couldn't stop looking at his hair. Also, that guy, I don't know what movie he thought he was in, but it was not the same movie everyone else thought they were in because he was doing like Ultra Bro.
I thought it worked, though, for the movie that he was. I thought the different styles worked because some of the like abruptness of what he was doing just made it all the more outlandish. So it gave like the straight actors something to react to that is just like so outside the norm for social interactions. So I thought it worked. Like when he asks them about his last name and he just says no, and doesn't like provide an explanation. Like that went over so well with people because it's just the abruptness of it.
That gentleman, Theodore Gottlieb, again credited his brother Theodore in the Burbs, was not only the voice of Gollum in the old Bakshi Hobbit animated movie, but was also in The Third Man with Orson Welles, among some other older credits. So he was around. He definitely has a unique look about him for sure.
And The Last Unicorn as a voice credit. Don't forget that.
There you go. I'm sorry.
You can't take the co-host out of Becky. She's doing research. Becky, you're more of a co-host than I am on this episode. You've actually done
in life too, yes.
How dare you?
That's the real reason I came on the podcast, is just to take over for you, Cameron. Sorry.
So in the ultimate, how dare you? In the ultimate, the Becky's Deep Cut of the Week, we've got Malachi from Children of the Corn as the young kid, like the main bad guy in the original Children of the Corn. I love that guy. The minute he popped up, I was like, oh, Children of the Corn guy.
He just has that good, creepy look. No offense to him, but
also, where's his mother? Like, who is like? There's like a weird all dudes thing going on in that house that I didn't totally follow the how and the what happened to mom. Like that whole family felt really like tacked together and unexplained in like a way that didn't really hurt the movie. I mean, it was fine for the movie, but like just looking at it now and I'm just like, we got the doctor guy who's old and a weird uncle guy who's old. And then we've got the young guy, and how he got with these two guys is unsure.
Clearly a woman's touch was needed in that weird, funky family.
That's right. That house could have used some decorative ideas. That's for sure.
I don't know. You didn't like the stock photo in the frame moment?
Oh, I did love that. And I also loved when Bruce Dern can't figure out which way to turn the piece of art. It was so.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
He turns it all three ways and it ends up being all three were wrong. Oh, so good. I love that. So other fun lines, by the way, is I love when he says, Ray, do you want him to take your family, kidnap them, tear their livers out, and make some kind of satanic pate? Good old Art there. That's a fun one. Art chanting the I want to kill everyone, Satan is good, Satan is our pal. That's probably maybe the most well-known line.
That might be.
I love
t-shirts
that.
out of that one.
Nobody knocks off an old man in my neighborhood and gets away with it. This is so good. I love it. Art's got a gun. Is really good. I also love when Corey Feldman's character just out of nowhere introduces his friend for reasons that have nothing really to do with anything. They like just introduced the kid by name, and it's just like, wait, what? Like, why are we? That felt like a weird waste of 30 seconds.
Right.
Like, it felt like such a weird non sequitur.
Anytime he chimed in or bothered Rumsfeld, it was just to have Rumsfeld say stuff like that kid's a meatball.
Kid's a meatball.
But the other Ray line, I don't think we mentioned, but the very end, when the news media is there, Ray in his most like Chicago was saying something. I wrote this one down. I think the message to psychos, fanatics, murderers, nutcases, all the world is you don't mess with suburbanites, because frankly, we're just not going to take it anymore. We're not going to be content to look after our lawns and wax our cars, paint our houses. We're out to get them. Don, we're out to get him, Don. Yeah, he's the highlight, one of the highlights for sure of this movie.
Yeah, Ducommun runs this movie. Like, he is the star of this movie for sure. But I think go ahead.
Sorry. Something that's not a quote, but just an exchange I really liked was between the garbage men, Dick Miller, and I can't remember the other actor's name.
Robert Picardo,
that's it. Just that whole exchange with them was way funnier than it needed to be for that moment.
Yes.
And like the way the Rick Picardo's character is just like, they're asking him to dump out the trash and he's like, oh, okay. Just was so funny.
He teamed on, took the other guy's side, and it made Dick Miller so mad. I agree. Yeah. That was one of the better scenes, I think, in the movie. And that trash is in the street till the very end.
It pays off multiple times.
Love it. When he drives
every time they drive over it. Oh, so good. And just the way they intro those garbage men too, how they're having this whole conversation where he's trying to convince them to go to some sort of like mystical retreat or something. Right. It's just like they could have had totally throwaway dialogue there, but this movie's pretty tightly packed with jokes. Not all of them land as well, but I appreciate the efficiency of storytelling, kind of going back to that, where there's not really a lot of wasted moments in the movie at all.
It's pretty economical.
Now, Shawn, we haven't talked about outside.
I still want to talk about Robert Picardo.
I know you only want to talk about Robert Picardo.
The Doctor on Star Trek Voyager. He's in a lot of Dante movies also, including Gremlins and Gremlins 2. I
I would argue that outside of Tom Hanks, Carrie Fisher, Bruce Dern, and maybe Corey Feldman, we haven't talked about the most notorious actor in this whole bunch.
Oh, Becky, talk to us about the most notorious actor in this bunch.
You know, someone in this cast is an Oscar winner.
Yes, the poodle, Queenie. It's the same dog from Silence of the Lambs.
It is the same dog from Silence.
Precious. It's Precious.
It is Precious.
That is
also that dog was in Batman Returns, but a lot of people did not recognize that Darla is the dog's name.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't recognize Darla in Batman Returns because poor thing was covered in mud as, mud covered dog number 2 or something like that. But yeah.
Mud covered dog number 2. Look how far that dog has come from mud covered dog number 2. Oscar winner.
Well, that was later, actually. That was later. That was Darla's last on-screen appearance. Sorry, I don't know why I know so much about Darla.
How much time in hours or in days, how much time did you spend looking up Darla?
Oh, not that much. Just
2 days? 3 days?
It's a measure of minutes, not days.
She had a run. Darla had a run. There's a tweet that went viral that had a picture of her 5 or 6 main roles, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, she's been in everything."
Darla
that little stretch, late '80s, early '90s.
Darla was killing it.
Yeah, pooping in all the lawns.
Except Walters. So,
but we haven't talked about Carrie Fisher, though. I do want to say we haven't really talked about her. Can we talk about Carrie
I was going to say she might be more underserved than anybody because even when they go over to their house finally, Bonnie's got as much to do as she does, but she just unfortunately has to play off of Tom Hanks just being the most miserable sack.
Yeah, I thought she was really good in the movie, though.
She is. Honestly. Oh, yeah. I'm not discounting that. I just mean as a character.
Yeah, she is very underwritten. She's basically just there to be Tom Hanks's wife and not much else. But yeah, she does. I mean, she does.
She's the voice of reason. She's the voice of reason in it. But it was just really nice because I was like, I haven't actually seen Carrie Fisher in that many roles where at this stage in her life, it's Star Wars Carrie Fisher, and then it's older Carrie Fisher that does cameos in horror movies mostly. And I was like, it's just really nice to see Carrie Fisher acting at, in a non Princess Leia role and not, later in her career and life. So I actually really enjoyed seeing her up on screen. Totally agree. She is not a super fleshed out character, but I think she has her moments. And I just was like, yeah, Carrie Fisher was a great actress.
Becky, you have seen When Harry Met Sally, I hope.
I actually haven't.
Oh my God! And we're about to do a Rob Reiner episode where you're going to be the me, where I can talk about it. But no, I only asked because she has a similar kind of, she's a very pleasant on screen. She's one of the side, the couple friends in that movie.
Yeah, and, I'm aware of that.
I agree. I wish she did more of it because she's always a welcome presence playing that kind of part. But yeah, she was busy writing so much in the early and mid 80s, late 80s that she probably didn't act as much as she could have. But yeah, every time I see her in a movie like this, of course, that's a welcome presence to see her doing something not Princess Leia.
Yeah, Brad and I have both not seen When Harry Met Sally, and so that's on our list to watch together sometime.
Do we do a double the bees, the fried or wrong bees come on?
I mean, I'm here for it. I'm definitely here.
We were looking for one that Becky and Brad possibly could both do, and now that Becky's cut her teeth on the show, she can come back with Brad. And you know what? I will say it. That is. I don't know anyone who wouldn't say that's not a top 5 rom-com of all time.
Oh, that's a big one. I mean
that's a pretty big one.
Right. And Brad is a huge fan of You've Got Mail, so he loves his rom-coms.
My wife randomly just watched that 2 weeks ago.
What a softie.
I knew Brad
was a softie.
Yeah. Because we were trying to find horror movies where we had a mutual blind spot, and there wasn't a lot to choose from. But if we're talking rom-coms, I'm sure we have a lot more options on the blind spots.
Okay, well, let's table this for just a second.
Let me confirm. I'm pretty sure he hasn't. Let me double check. Sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah, Brad is going to be like, how dare you say that? I love rom-coms.
We'll take it home here and we'll kind of bring this back up in a moment. But any final thoughts before you go? Are you very glad you saw it? Did it feel like a movie you had seen a scene or two of, or did it feel familiar at all? Or I should have seen this when I was younger, or maybe I did?
Yeah, it does feel like something I would have enjoyed when I was younger, though. I'm actually really glad I watched it now as a first-time watch. 1, because I got to see it in a theater instead of at home. 2, I might not have appreciated it as a child if I had seen it in the way that I appreciate it now as, a homeowner with a lawn to take care of and all of that. The jokes landed a lot better. I don't necessarily relate to all of the perspectives about neighbors in the movie. Much more chill about my neighbors, obviously, and don't suspect them all of being psychopaths. But I think the humor probably lands a little better with me now than it might have if I had seen it. I was 2 years old when the movie came out. So, if I had seen it, though, at some point in the 90s, it probably would not have worked for me in the same way. And I also did not grow up in a suburban neighborhood. I grew up out in the middle of the woods.
No, fair. So yeah, you probably do appreciate it more.
Especially wouldn't have really understood that dynamic. And it probably wouldn't have worked as well for my parents either, who are just like very different people. So
if you haven't seen it, Becky, now's the time for you to hit another Tom Hanks classic, The Money Pit.
I haven't seen The Money Pit.
That'll only hit because you're now a homeowner, because otherwise it's not particularly good.
That's one I've not seen since I was young, and I could remember hardly anything about it at the moment. But
it's not great. But if you're a homeowner, I think it
I hear
a little bit of the horrors. So before we let you go, Becky, we always ask everybody, and no one's prepared for it, but I feel like you're going to nail this. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to get the word out on?
Sure. Well, check out the Paper Street podcast. Nice. And get that out of the way. But also with my partner Brad and I, we do monthly horror trivia in Denver. It's called Fright or Wrong. You can find it at Fright or Wrong on Instagram. Next month, and on our Pride Month, we are covering the Child's Play franchise, which is going to be really fun. And we do that every second Friday at the Alamo Draft House in Sloan's Lake, which is the main one closest to downtown Denver. So
yeah, you've had some good turnouts for the themed ones, the Saw and the Scream ones you've done. So if you're in the Colorado area, check out Fright or Wrong trivia at the Draft House.
We did Final Destination last month, and I was not sure how that was going to go because I'm like, how many are there? I know people love those movies, but are there fans? There were. They showed up. Fans. People watched all of the movies in preparation for it. So if you do come, it's hard. You got to do your homework if you want a chance to win. But
oh yeah, these two don't F around, man. We do their horror trivia at Telluride every time we attend, and they're no joke. They say, in fact, it's so granular we get in fights with them. Like Brad gets yelled at every year.
Well, Brad has dumb questions and Becky has good questions, and that's how you can tell the difference.
I didn't say that, Brad. I love you, Brad.
No, they're just hard.
Brad knows I love him too, but just not as much as
I will say our Telluride Horror Show trivia, which is another thing I'll plug. Go buy tickets for the Telluride Horror Show in October. One of the best festivals around. It's mid-October up in the mountains. Gorgeous. But we do host trivia there as well. Our trivia there tends to be a bit harder just because we're dealing with Uber fans and pen and paper old school trivia versus multiple choice. So
Shawn, Talley, and I are former champions. No big deal. But we did win one year. We came second.
Two-time second placers.
Yeah, we got Phil Noville, friend of the show.
I want Cameron to back me up on this, but this will be the last time I mention Brad. He's had enough free plugs here. But if you and Brad do not think your neighbors are psycho, the good rule of thumb is that they think you're the psychos.
Yeah.
Oh, probably. We're the weird Halloween house who kept our, 12-foot Home Depot skeleton out way too long. It's still up, but it's just in our backyard instead of our front yard now. So people can see it from the other side.
Don't be surprised if you come home tomorrow and your neighbor's digging around in your basement. Just putting that out there. Becky, again, thank you for doing this and coming slumming it with Shawn and I for a couple hours. I know your time is far more valuable than ours, so we appreciate it. And I'm excited you finally got to watch The Burbs, and I got to rewatch The Burbs. This was the first one where I got like a little smidge of a rewatch too, so this was nice.
Oh wait, we did the intro, Becky. We need to just keep her on for the outro. We've thrown everything off on this episode, so let's just have Becky stick around for the extra 5 minutes so we don't make it weird.
Hey man, I'm here either way.
Also, you skipped the one major question we have to ask in the wrap up. Becky's mentioning horror blind spots, comedy blind spots. What are your major ones? When you gave us a few, I know you had Teen Wolf and some other ones on there, but like I selfishly picked The Burbs because it's a big comfort movie for me. But what are your top 2 or 3 major blind spots still that are not When Harry Met Sally?
Oh, gosh.
We know she's got the horror stuff down, so maybe there's just like an obvious kind of
I do think there's a lot of 80s comedies I haven't seen just because it's just not something I watched a lot of growing up, and I haven't had necessarily reasons to go back to them. And I'm pretty picky about comedies, not gonna lie. And a lot of the like sort of 80s sex comedies are kind of tough to watch now, to be honest.
Oh, boy.
I haven't seen Animal House. I haven't seen Porky's, which I don't know how quintessential those are, but those are some that come to mind that I hadn't seen. Took me a long time to watch Groundhog Day, but I have seen that now.
I would argue that Animal House is a pretty big one. Like that's kind of a tier one.
And it's got moments, but it's not nearly what Revenge of the Nerds and Porky's are as far as the P word goes, the problematic stuff.
Yeah.
And I think Animal House is definitely more zeitgeisty. Like there's a lot of references to it in pop culture. So that is one that I do feel like is a pretty big blind spot of mine. Other than that, there's probably some older, golden age cinema things that I haven't seen for sure. No, fair enough. We've already added you to the list for the rom-com. The Fright or Wrong, When Harry Met Sally. We'll have you back for sure. One other thing we usually will mention at the very, very end, but you're here with us. But the Burbs, as box office goes, it did open at number 1 with 11 million on its opening weekend in February of '89, and overall in the U.S. made 36 and then 49 worldwide million, that is, and came in 34th, wedged between Bill and Ted at 31, War of the Roses 32, Karate Kid Part 3 33, and right in front of Naked Gun, Fletch Lives, and License to Kill. 1989 was an amazing year. These are in the 30s. I'm naming all these movies. These are all movies like everybody knows.
It's a real shame that Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was only the 31st highest grossing movie of that year. All those movies are good, but Bill and Ted's a classic and should have been treated as such.
Yeah, it's certainly considered more so now, of course. And again, The Burbs, I still think, really does qualify as a cult movie, and partly because, as we talked about at the top, how unavailable it has been for most of the time. It has a following, it has an audience, but it is not in that mainstream the way that a Gremlins is for Dante, or that some of those 80s movies are, where like people quote it off and people can name check it off. And like you talk to your normie neighbors and half of them have not seen or heard of this movie still. So I do think it qualifies as the word cult, which has taken on all kinds of definitions these days. But no, I'm very glad Becky got to see it. Again, I'm sure there were bigger movies we could have picked, but I'm glad we did this one. I'm glad Cameron got
Shawn, would you say this was
Talk about how undercooked it was.
Shawn, would you say this was your shallow cut movie of the week?
It was
let's cut that. That was not funny. It was funny in my mind. I thought it was going to be funny, but you can't win them all. And so if Shawn doesn't cut that, then I apologize, listener. And
I didn't cut your talking about the submersibles in Titanic, but I stand by that. All I'm thinking about you right now is putting you on a barbecue like the dream sequence in The Burbs, just having you being roasted to Rick Ducommun screaming at you and a little funny 1920s magician mustache.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That is the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Also, underrated Jerry Goldsmith score. That man was amazing. And it's not Gremlins iconic, but it's still a good score if you hear it in this movie.
Agreed.
So, once more, Fright or Wrong, if you're in and around Denver, Colorado, go check her and Brad out at Sloan Lake's Draft House is their normal location. But yeah, their themed ones are real fun. They're having great turnouts. So we're hoping to see her again in October for Telluride Horror Show. I will see her again shortly for the next Paper Street Podcast record. PaperStreetPodcast.com. You can find both that show and this show. This has been a presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Thank you, Becky, again, who was late to the party, but we're very glad you made it. For Cameron, for Becky, I am Shawn Talley. Thank you for listening to our nonsense. And don't be late to the party.
Rick Ducommun rules.
Satan is good. Satan is our pal.
Oh, I did not mention Hank's improvising, picking up that stretcher and throwing the ambulance, which is one of the funniest improvs he's ever done.
That was hilarious. The way he does it like a child is so funny.